you listen to the Neil Lamptey Show, and I'm joined by Paul.
All right, mate.
And by Ed.
Hi, mate.
Moments of the week. Who would like to start? I'm dragging this out so that one of you can think of it, and I'm going to throw it to Paul.
Well, it was going to be the hilarious bit of Twitter banter by both the football club and then a little bit later by Tom Bayliss. And then I decided that basically I was going to go existential like I like to. So my moment of the week is the thought process that must be going through JCH's mind at the moment when he was signed, I'm assuming to be first choice, and now he finds himself not even in the squad. I'd love to know what was going on within that already, I think, delicate mind.
It's really bizarre, isn't it?
You know my opinion. I wouldn't have signed Johnson Clark-Harris. I don't think. By the end of this, he was obviously brought in basically to push Biamu, which is fine, and Biamu came out towards the end of the season better. But the fact that Johnson Clark-Harris clearly wasn't even above Biamu, and he was going to go out and sign another striker. Either Bakayoko is a bit of a panic signing, which I don't think it is. I would have thought they've obviously been looking into that.
Yeah, I think they want him, don't they? Yeah.
So, because they spent money on him, and they spent, a proportion of money. So the fact that they signed JCH, they've now decided JCH isn't. Obviously, it's early days, yada yada yada. But if we're going to play one up front, which is what we look like we're going to do, it just seems odd to have three strikers who are. You wouldn't have thought they're going to play together even if we played 4-4-2. So. Yeah, it'd just be interesting what's going through. And I think there's a couple of other players who, whether we'll get on to them or not, but I think there's a couple of players you think that's an interesting decision. I think Robbins has got quite a lot of decisions to make with the squad he's got. And that's just, I think, one of the more interesting ones, because we only just signed him.
Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it, with Clark?
No, go ahead.
It's funny with Clark-Harris, I think, that presumably because of the manner in which he left the club the last time, and there were quite a lot of rumours, weren't there, when he was in the sort of youth setup, that he was sort of a bit of a difficult personality, maybe that he had a big ego and that sort of thing. And I've just noticed those sorts of rumours resurfacing, and I think that's really unfair, because at the moment, I'm not party to any sort of private information, but I don't see any kind of evidence that he's a sort of disruptive personality, or that anybody in the squad is a kind of disruptive personality.
No, and I mean, I hate to keep harking back to them videos over the summer of the players doing the him or me thing. He seemed like a pretty well turned out lad, didn't he? He wouldn't like. There seems to be a reasonable amount of squad harmony. I just think it's mad to sign as many attackers as Robbins did. It's like we've talked about it, haven't we?
My point isn't the fact that you might be disruptive or not. It's more the fact that it must be quite a weird.
I almost wouldn't blame him for being disruptive. If you would have, if in at the end of May you'd have been told, "Oh yeah, sign for the club, and you're going to be like certainly around the discussion of playing," and then like 2 months later you're like, "Oh sorry, I've signed another 3 strikers ahead of you." Why did you bother signing me then? And
that's the thing. It's not like you could say, "Well, we signed him and he hasn't turned out to be the player or personality we thought he had." We had him on loan. We can't know any more about him. And and sort of we have, as you say, I forgot that we signed Geordie as well, who is obviously a striker, and it's just I don't know. It's just. I think the transfer. People have been making a big thing about the transfer window. I think we can't really judge that until we've seen everyone play. I think we're making quite a lot of sort of sweeping statements. My interesting thing about both Bakayoko and Geordie is there's to some extent they're sort of average, maybe top average League One players. And I know we signed Geordie from the Premier League, but technically we sort of signed him after being at Fleetwood and Bradford for 2 years.
He's only really played in League One, hasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean he's a League One player more than he's been anything else, and Bakayoko's a League One player, so it's going to be interesting to see. I think one of my questions, which probably won't get onto at this point, but I think is quite interesting, is last season if you'd have said what's par, we probably would have said playoffs. This season, if you say what should we be achieving, what's overachieving, what's underachievement, I don't think we really know. I don't think we have a squad which is full of, not like when we were under Mowbray, we had a squad full of championship players and you thought, playoffs is par. not achieving playoffs is underachieving. This season, I think we have got a lot of average League One players. Maybe part of this season is 10th.
Do you not think we've got to wait and have a look at them? We need to we need to get 10 games in. For all we know, Bakayoko could be a very, very powerful, good striker, couldn't he? I think once we get in, I know what you're saying, but I think we'll talk about this once we get into the meat of the Wimbledon game, I suppose. Let's get the moments of the week out of the way. Ed, what are you going for?
I'm going to go for reports of Mark Robins breaking the fourth wall to tell one of our own fans to shut up. I'm a big fan of that sort of thing. I think the sort of interaction between the sort of spectacle and the spectator at a football match is so often one-sided, isn't it? And the fans kind of sit within this sort of protected space where they can say whatever they like, and the players and coaches are subject to just listening to that. I think it's brilliant when that is sort of disrupted by a maverick like Mark Robins, who is pushing the boundaries of the form.
Well, let me bring you back to one of my all-time favourite live football moments, which was Morecambe away last season, which actually is one of the worst, most dispiriting games I've ever been to. But within it held that isolated moment of beauty where their centre-half made the jerk-off and cum motion towards a certain section of Cov fans that resulted in one of the Cov fans then going to the copper that was stood behind, not even the steward, to the copper. And you couldn't hear him because he was too far away, but you could see that at first he was trying to explain what had happened and then had to resort to mimicking the hand motion. You could just see the policeman was just sort of saying to him, "What do you want me to do about that?"
I mean, I don't think it's a criminal offence, is it?
The guy was furious. You just think, there's never been a more princessy set of people than football fans to stand on the sidelines shouting fucking blue murder at people, and then as soon as someone says anything back, they're like, Ebola! I mean, that is top class. As well, pure Robins.
Oh yeah, I think he's probably quite a scary Robins. Little guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to see. I'm going to speak for Neil and Neil, who couldn't join us today. Hi, Neil. Of seeing J-Mads, seeing JM10 Madders on Friday night, bossing it against Man United before he came off. Did either of you watch any of it?
I didn't see it, but I'm less than happy with him because I placed a number of different bets.
Yeah, I had him first goal scorer.
All of which were dependent on him performing feats that have almost never been achieved on a football pitch, and he didn't deliver on any of them. So I'm out of pocket. So I'm not that happy with him.
Well, I think we were robbed of certain financial glory by a baffling handball decision that against a Man United team who are desperate to not play any football. Don't give away a penalty in the 3rd minute. It's a really schoolboy error. And then classic De Gea depriving him of that first goal. That was a really good save, wasn't it? From I thought he was really, really good. I think some people have maybe wanked off a little bit too hard about how good he was, but I thought he was make your Premier League debut against Man United on the first game of the season with the cameras on you. He was really good. Unfortunately, we can't spend the next hour talking about that. We've got to talk about what was... Look, some people have really criticised this as being a really terrible performance and a really terrible result. I just don't think it is, but it was a boring game. Fair?
Yeah, I think it was... I don't think it was a bad result at all, and I don't think it was a bad performance. I think it was quite an ugly game. I think it was essentially two teams who were lining up in relatively similar ways, cancelling each other out tactically, so there was not a lot of space on the pitch. People were finding it difficult to find space, so it really did come down to being about individual battles. And neither team was really able to impose themselves on the other for the majority of the game. I mean, I thought that Wimbledon probably had the best of the first half. They were certainly just about dominant in terms of possession, in terms of territory, all that kind of thing. And I have seen a lot of comments suggesting that, they are kind of this bunch of sort of anabolic juggernauts who were sort of setting about destroying us physically. I've seen that, in fact, from one Kent-based discredited blogger, and I don't really agree with that. I mean, they are a physical team; they are big, but to suggest that they were these kind of Neanderthals who are trying to sort of bully us out of the game, that's not accurate.
Can I quickly case for the prosecution here? Centre-backs were Tom Davis and Dominic Hyam, and our midfielders were Abu Ogogo and Michael Doyle. let's not take any sort of physical moral high ground here. This isn't...
Yeah, I mean, exactly. This is. I mean, Robbins was saying it himself. Saying, "Oh, they've had to defend 20 crosses. That's just the way they play," and all that sort of thing. It's like we're this sort of group of footballing aesthetes, who are really kind of artists for whom the result is secondary, and Wimbledon are a kind of late 80s, early 90s crazy gang iteration of Wimbledon. I don't think it was like that at all. I thought that Wimbledon had a fair bit of success down the flanks. They've got a winger called Barcham who was playing on left-hand side. He's a skillful player. He managed to get himself one-on-one with Sterling a couple of times, and he was able to beat people and get crosses in. But I mean, I don't know what your impression was, but my impression, and I had an appalling view of the game, by the way, but my impression was that it was a sort of ugly battle with people trying to make those kind of individual sort of battles count.
Yeah, and I think it's the most notable thing is what you're talking about with the individual battles there. And I think that the positives were Brandon Mason, who I thought was very, very good indeed. I thought he was... My guess would be... The funny thing is, actually, he came off with cramp, didn't he, after about 70 minutes? And then Junior Brown came on, who you would have thought... going into the season was the first choice, and then I actually thought Junior Brown was very good when he came on.
Yeah, same here.
But it would appear that Mason has been so impressive that he's usurped him without even without Brown ever having got a sniff, basically. But you can see why. I just thought he was. I mean, I really liked Dion Kelly-Evans, but Brandon Mason looked like the upgraded version of him. Really effective going forward, really effective going back, and had a lot of the ball and gave them an awful lot of problems. And the other obvious one that I thought stood out was Bayliss. I thought Bayliss for us was just... I think it's really annoying watching him operate off the right-hand side, because I think he could do so much more damage centrally, and especially deeper as well. But that what is good is that there were... albeit only very brief shooting signs of there being a relationship built up between him and Andrew that sort of makes the sort of starting position of Bayliss a bit redundant, because all it really is about them two linking up and having some sort of connection between each other that means that they can sort of float around wherever they want to. The only disappointing thing about that is then they need to have somebody to pass a ball to, and it doesn't look immediately like those two would be natural bedfellows for Huula and Bakayoko. Bakayoko, I thought, played fine, had a couple of decent efforts. Huula less so. I thought he tried but didn't really come off for him. That's not a criticism of him inherently. I just didn't think it worked for him especially well. But I thought that there were signs. But I think in the negatives... Oh, and Tom Davis was very good as well. Tom Davis, I thought, dealt with... I mean, in a game that... There are Tom Davis games, evidently, aren't there? And this definitely was one. And if you want somebody to head everything out of the air, even if it's only 3 inches off the ground, he is very much your man, isn't he?
Yeah, it was a Tom Davis game, and I was actually with some mates who are Wimbledon fans, so I was standing with them, and I was really close to the pitch and quite close to our box in the first half, and watching the kind of physical commitment behind what Davis does close up. Like, he's a really powerful, intense player. The only thing that I would say is that because every clearance is made with maximum conviction and with defence as like a clear priority, I do sometimes wonder if he has an opportunity to get us on the counter with a more considered clearance, with a more considered ball out. But he's so focused on just winning the ball, just clearing the lines, that isn't an option. And I felt like in a game where we were struggling to get a foothold, we were struggling to get possession of the ball. And I've seen loads of people praising him, and I totally agree. Defensively, I thought he was dominant. I thought he was impressive. I felt like occasionally he's not doing us any favours in terms of ball retention in a game where that was an issue for us.
If you had one criticism of Tom Davies, it's that he could just do with being a touch more like Ruud Gullit. Is that where you're coming from on that one?
Just a bit. I would go that. No, look, I mean, I don't necessarily want to see him dwelling on the ball when pressure is being put on him and that kind of thing. I don't think that he's Ruud Gullit or the next Ruud Gullit, John Stones, and I wouldn't expect him to do that sort of thing. But I sometimes just felt like those clearances are just purely functional defensively, and that there are some players who are capable of doing both of those things better than he can. But it wasn't that sort of game.
But he didn't play football in League Two. It's like he is what he is, isn't he? I think the interesting thing is who he plays alongside him going forward, because obviously he didn't play Willis because Willis is still coming back from injury. I mean, that is going to be what an interesting how that centre-back partnership develops through the season, because I think there are question marks over them. Obviously they did well against Wimbledon and kept Wimbledon out. It'd be interesting to see how when they play against more mobile strike partnership or ones who, by the sounds of it, are a bit quicker and going the other way. But, I think we still all agree that we need another defender. I think hopefully the other defender would be someone who's a bit more of a passer. But how many passes are you going to get in League One?
I just think it's massively overrated. Ball retention, passing. I think it's the sort of thing that happens in high leagues with the money and everything. Did you see all the Arsenal fans getting on their backs because they were trying to pass it around at the back? I think there's a different. But sorry, But going back to what Ed said, I don't think it's a case of we're not expecting someone to come in and play like Franco Baresi. What we're expecting someone to do is when they punt it in the general direction in which is going to benefit the team. And I think there are times where, with Tom Davies's enthusiasm, he's not really bothered which part of the pitch he kicks it to. He's just happy if he kicks it and it's still in play. We're not asking for someone to bring it out and play wonderful football. You're looking for someone who can play a direct pass into the forwards or into the channels, which is the players have got a good chance of getting to the end of. I know,
yeah, exactly.
And obviously I'm being churlish, but I just think you underestimate how difficult it is.
Well, I just think we've had players in the past in League One who possibly aren't that bad. And this goes back to my argument about the forwards as well. I look at both Hyam and Tom Davies, and I look at them and I think at best they're solid League One players, which is fine. Yeah. I have no issue with that, and that's fine. I find it interesting that I still find it interesting they let Rod go. I know we've sort of discussed that a little bit, and we've left with Hyam and Davies, who for large periods of last season were both second choice or third or fourth choice or whatever. Neither of them was starting first teamers. We're now in a position where, apparently, I said, you two saw it both, and everyone seems to be giving Tom Davies praise. That's fine. I can just see from where Ed's going from what I've seen at times, and I don't think all passes from the back four are always under complete pressure. I think you do have a little bit of time.
A poor point on my part.
But I just think that it's. I would be surprised if we don't get another centre. I'd be worried if we didn't get another centre half in before the end of the transfer window. I suppose looking at it from someone who didn't go, and I know you sort of very slightly touched on him. I suppose the thing is where we're getting the ball from the back. Obviously, when you've got Biami up front as a defender, it's easier to hit the ball forward because you know that if you hit it in his area, he's going to win it. I suppose my question is with Bakayoko, A, did he win the ball in the air? B, did you see that sort of... Obviously, one thing we discussed last week is Biami doesn't run behind. That's that's fine as long as he's doing his other job, which is basically bringing the ball under control and giving to set off. And I think sometimes when you can have too many creative forwards, where you always need that one who's your constant of gets the ball, passes the ball, controls the ball, can play with his back to goal, I suppose. Is back to what did you think of Bakayoko in those sort of the job he's going to be asked to do, playing in that focal point of the strikers?
Ed, did he operate in an area of the pitch that you could see?
He did.
Okay.
He did. Yeah. So I think the sort of comparison between Biamou and Bakayoko and Clark Harris that people are making as sort of candidates for that number 9 role is less applicable to Bakayoko. In at least he is not like a Biamou target man. He won a few flick-ons, but he's not going to, like Biamou does, just make a long ball his own and bring other people into play with strength by holding it up. That doesn't look to me like the sort of player that he is. What he does definitely offer, which Biamou doesn't, is that he can go in behind.
Yeah. And
he did that a couple of times, actually. He had 2, would you say, half decent chances, Joey?
Well, I think not half chances, I guess, in sort of common football cliche parlance, is I wouldn't have expected him to score either, but I felt like he did better with them than the chances were, if that makes sense. The one was from reasonable range, wasn't it? That he hit with real venom, and I think that just flashed over the bar. But it was just, it was a speculative shot from range. And there was another one, like maybe in the second half. Oh, the one that was cleared off the line, effectively, that he actually did very well with. On another day, he could have had 2 goals there that he would have got largely out of nothing. The second one I'd have to have a look at again, but I think he does well to fashion a chance out of it, even though he's in shooting range. I thought he looked like a player that had transitioned between clubs at this point of the season and maybe looked a bit rusty, but I thought there were very positive signs in what he was doing. But like you say, it would have made more sense to look at him and he be 5'10" than he be the size that he is, because everyone then just assumes that he'll be a big target man. He didn't play like that at all, did he?
This is something that I'm finding quite frustrating. Is still seeing conversations with people saying, "Oh, what we need now is a small striker."
Yeah,
and so this sort of preoccupation with the idea that body shape in some way, determines whether somebody can kind of be a good finisher or is sort of predatory in the box or something like that, or that you need to have a little and large combo, which is not compulsory.
I agree with that, but it also does dictate typically a level of mobility, doesn't it? So you think that a big 6'4" guy isn't likely to have the nippiness required to be a sort of on the shoulder type player. It just so happens that he does. But you would have to admit that at times it was incongruous on Saturday to see a player of his stature. It's a little bit like, I quite like Marko Arnautovic, who I think is an odd player, who's like 6'2", 6'3", but is, he glides along the pitch fabulously. But it's like a bumblebee isn't meant to fly aerodynamically, is it? It's a
but I think there are enough examples of physically imposing centre forwards who are also able to go in behind. Of big guys who are more than capable of stretching a defence with pace, and he does look like he can do that. I agree with you, Joey. I actually thought, particularly on the second chance, which was in the second half, he was again played in behind. Keeper came out to meet him, and he tried to dink it over the keeper. The keeper got a touch on it, and it was then cleared away. I thought the attempt at the finish was actually
smart.
Composed, and a really respectable effort. And so, from what I saw of him, I felt quite encouraged. But he's not going to be a sort of like for like with Biamou. It's just not the sort of player that he is, and we're not going to play that way if we've got him in the team.
The annoying thing is that looking at them is that when one replaced the other, the only thing that I thought was I wouldn't mind seeing these two up front together.
Agreed. And I think that, to come back to something that you touched on, Joey, earlier, which was really about kind of Bayliss's creative contribution, which was generally pretty impressive, and he was definitely our sort of creative spark in the game. There were a couple of times, or at least one situation in the first half, where he managed to beat a man just with kind of pace, just managed to glide away from somebody, and he played Hiwula in, and Hiwula should have been in on goal round the back of the defence. No. He took a really heavy touch, knocked it into the keeper's arms, and the chance was gone. Robbins was asked about that in his press conference after, and he was really keen to suggest that Bayliss had made a mess of the pass. I was right on top of that situation.
No, I don't think he did. I don't think it was perfect, but I don't think it was. I think
the pass was fine, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was okay. It wasn't just the pass. I don't think the pass was like I say. There was two things I'd say about this. One, I think the pass. I think it could have been slightly better, if I'm totally honest, but it was just as much the player receiving it. The funny thing is I was convinced at the time, even though it's completely counterintuitive because of where it was, but it looked to me like it was number 16, which would have been a Go-Go that missed that. But it must have been Hiwula, mustn't it?
I'm sure it was Hiwula.
Yeah, that's fine then, okay. But yeah, you're right. It's unfair to say explicitly it was a bad pass that did it. I think the pair of them could probably have to hold both of their hands up. But you clearly think it was a perfectly fine ball.
Yeah, I mean, I was right next to it. I thought it was reasonably weighted. It wasn't behind him particularly. It was just a really heavy touch, and not even a touch that sort of meant that he needed another touch. It was a touch that meant that another touch wasn't possible.
Yeah, it was a chance killer, wasn't it? That first.
I mean, do they look disjointed, the front four? Which is it's going to be, isn't it? I mean, they've just met and shook hands and then they're playing. Which
it's not just that.
You also, what else do you think it is then?
You need to have one of these things like on Britain's Got Talent where you shut me up for making the same point over and over again. But I'm just convinced that Robbins' version of setting up an attack is choosing the four players that he hasn't fallen out with that week and vomiting them on the pitch together. I can't work out in my head what fits those four. Look, and I'll hold my hands up. I haven't seen them explicitly, but before you talk about quality particularly, it would be very surprising after having watched Hiwula and Bakayoko and everything that it turns out later in the season that they're vastly different players to the way that they at least operated, not to say the quality of it. But looking at them on Saturday, they were like, it was Bayliss and Andrew operated in such a way that you could tell they wanted Adam Armstrong in front of them. They wanted to drive forward, interplay with each other, and then spring someone through. But that wasn't Bakayoko's positions weren't. I don't know. I don't know. It didn't click at all for me.
But I think Bakayoko is capable of Bakayoko is capable of being that player.
But then to bring him off and bring Biamu on, and it doesn't smack of a game plan to me. It just doesn't. I know that it's churlish after 2 games to criticise Robbins, and I'm not especially. I think he proved last season that actually that vomiting a bunch of players onto the pitch can work and does work for him. I would just prefer to see. I think I quite like a lot of the players that we've got going forward, but I think they would have to be set up in ways that would complement each other. I'm not convinced that that's what's happening at the moment.
Well, would that be because I don't know if you've seen the under-23s, but the guy
Alassani scored, hasn't he?
Well, not only bugger the fact he scored. Alassani's in the under-23s, and considering the way that he'd been playing in the pre-season, and with the fact that Jody Jones was injured. I'm very surprised that he's not even. Obviously, he wasn't in the squad on Saturday, and he's obviously not going to be in the squad tomorrow because we're playing tomorrow, and he's playing tonight. So he's obviously some way away from being in the first team squad. It would appear. Obviously, if he continues to play how he has been doing in the under-23s, they're going to have to give him a chance. But it's interesting that, considering he scored that goal against West Brom, he was getting quite a lot of kudos. The fact that Joe Jones is injured, the fact you look at the bench and there's not a lot of pace or creativity or directness on the bench, it's interesting that he's not even in the squad. And I mean, the other question which I'm going to ask you is about Doyle. Now, for me, I agree. I'd play Bayliss in the central midfield too. I think you play him alongside a Gogo. But
that's what I would do.
But I think the problem is we already have 2 very attacking fullbacks. We have then 4 attacking players who are playing 4-2-3-1. So naturally, those front 4 are going to be more attacking. I don't think, from what we've seen with Robins, I don't think he's ever going to trust Bayliss in the midfield too to play, because then you're basically playing with 3 defensive players. And one thing we've learnt from Robins is that's not his style in any way, shape or form.
I would say there's a player that, I'll say this very quickly and then let Ed jump in, but I think the player that we're missing from last season who hasn't featured particularly from the start at least is Jordan Shipley, who I think possibly gives you the balance that you can then play Bayliss in the middle, because he's got enough of a defensive sensibility and enough of an engine to get back and support players. And I think he, weirdly, wherever he is on the pitch, adds balance, because he's that sort of player, isn't he? He's dynamic enough that he can do and operate wherever he needs to be. Ed, your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, just to say that, as you touched on earlier, I think that Bayliss' starting position, which is nominally wide on the right, I do think that is a bit of a red herring. And I think I mentioned this after the Morecambe game at the end of last season when he was starting on the right hand side in more of a 4-4-2, that Robins was standing right next to him, and every time Bayliss looked at him, Robins was gesturing with his hand for Bayliss to move more centrally. So I think that it's slightly sort of misleading to think of them as operating in, with Bayliss out wide. I think it ends up probably being more of a sort of box with a Gogo, Andra, Bayliss and Doyle. And then we're looking for width from the fullbacks, which brings us on to...
Yeah.
That was good, wasn't it?
It was nice, actually. Yeah, it was very nice.
But then
if you hadn't have stopped halfway through,
it's less good.
Noticed.
It's less good when you make a comment about how good it was, right?
Yeah, which is usually what I complain about. So hoisted by my own. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, and I think that let's talk about Sterling, because he's still the subject, isn't he, of a bit of discussion. I thought that defensively on Saturday, he was reasonably robust. I mean, he's part of a back 4 that kept a clean sheet in a reasonably tough game against a strongish team. So he deserves some credit for that. And I think that, given the fact that they kept a clean sheet, there is no way that he is going to get dropped for whatever Robins considers to be the next meaningful game. It might be that he doesn't play against Oxford. It might be that Robins gives Grimm a go against Oxford. But even if he does, I would expect, based on the fact that they kept a clean sheet last game, based on the fact that he started the last 2 games, that Sterling will be right back in our next match, in our next league game. What I still am not sure about with Sterling, and what I'm a bit disappointed about, is what is he offering us going forward?
Yeah.
But isn't that a bit of the fact that he knows if he goes forward, he's completely... It's the problem with playing 4-2-3-1 is if you play 4-4-2, then you know what your role is. Very simple. Your role as a right back is to get up and down, but you've got that protection of the right midfielder in front of you. And the whole team sort of setup is quite rigid, which is why some people like it and a lot of people have moved away from it. The problem, as you say, when you're playing 4-2-3-1 with Bayliss tucking inside, is you've got to trust the fact that, and to some extent it didn't happen again. It happened against Scunthorpe, and he got hammered for it. Is he went forward, the move broke down, and people are pointing the finger at him for the fact that we conceded. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how you can get Sterling to be confident going forward and basically take a little bit of the pressure off him, because he is still basically a defensive player. He is still our right back. So it's how you sort of make sure that the whole team is still solid enough that if it does break down when he's out of position, it's not sort of seen as his fault. And I think that's the same with Mason on the left. Whoever we play at right back or left back, if you're going to play 4-2-3-1, you're going to have the same issue where you've got to trust that the right back is going to be given that licence, that sometimes you are going to concede down his side, and it's not going to be his fault.
Ed, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you say that it's about formations, I don't think I agree with that. I think it's about the person who's playing in front of him in any given formation. So whether we play a 4-4-2 or whether we play a 4-2-3-1, if Bayliss is the person who is playing nominally on the right-hand side in that formation, Bayliss is always going to be tucking inside. And so Sterling is always going to need to be the person who's offering width in attack down that flank. And at the moment, he's not doing that. And I do feel some sympathy with Grimmer, whose last competitive action for us basically was slamming, a wonder goal into the top corner at Wembley. Yeah. And now he's on the bench. So I'm sympathetic to him for that. But I don't think that he will be back in the team, because I think that the 0-0 gives Robins enough reason to say, let's leave it. Let's not screw this.
I agree. I think Grimmer has been hard done by in terms of the fact that he did nothing to deserve to be dropped. And I think you could also make the same again with Shipley, who did nothing wrong, also scored at Wembley last time out, and has been sort of usurped by Geordie. You've also got Burge, who came back and was on the bench. And you could say, Liam O'Brien didn't really do anything wrong against Scunthorpe, but if Burge was your first choice, he comes straight back in. The same with Biamu. He did nothing wrong against Scunthorpe. We only signed the guy, 2 days before. He clearly hadn't trained with us. But Robbins has decided that Bakayoko's his man, in the same way he's decided that Sterling is his man and Geordie is his man. I think it's one of those things, isn't it? We discussed this. You get promoted, you buy new players because you think they're going to be better than the ones that you previously had. And this also goes back to the big thing is everyone wants a big squad. Everyone's like, yeah, we've got 2 players for each position. That's great, but it does put a lot of pressure on the manager, because the manager's got 20 first teamers.
Yeah.
And to some extent, it's probably easier to have 14, 15 first teamers. Obviously what you want is to have a pretty solid settled team, and then hopefully have no injuries. But we're in the position we're in. Robbins has got this, especially in the attacking areas. He's got, as we said, 3 people fighting for the first choice number 9 spot. He's got about another 6 or 7 who can play in the 3 behind. He's got 2 fullbacks in both positions. He's got 2 first choice goalkeepers. It's even in midfield, he's got Kelly to come back, and he's not going to keep everyone happy, and that includes the fans. But I suppose the fans have got to make sure they don't turn on whoever is in the team above their favourite, because that's not going to help either.
The other thing I would say on the big squad is, and this is probably confirmation bias, so I'm sure somebody will pick this apart on Twitter. The last 3 Premier League champions, Leicester, Chelsea and Man City. Is that right? Leicester was 3 years ago?
Yeah.
That's right. Leicester and Chelsea, I'm guessing we could all name the most featuring first 11s from each of those seasons, because they were absolutely identical week in, week out. But Man City, of course, did have like a reasonable level, quite a significant level of rotation throughout the season. But the crucial bit of it is the players that they rotated out, the players that came in and did exactly the same job that they were being asked to whoever their replacement was. And I think that where I think the difference is here is that you're absolutely right about, one, it's difficult to keep all of the players happy, but when you're looking at the players that we've got in those positions, I think they're all very different players. So I don't think there's that clear thing that says, if Bayliss... I don't think it's as simple as saying, if Bayliss is injured, then somebody else comes in and does that job, because they're all very individual players, aren't they? If Huulu got injured, is his replacement going to be whoever the next person behind him is that does an identical job? I just don't see it, and it's typified by... Bakayoko came off on Saturday and Biamu comes on, and you think, but you 2 was really clear to see straight away. You're two very different players. Surely you have to then change what you're doing. But it didn't really happen, did it? It's kind of, they'll work it out. You kind of think... Well, I mean, I've imagined Robin saying that, obviously, but I can see him saying that.
But also the thing with Man City is you say that they change... But what Man City tended to do is they tended to have they had 5 or 6 players who played 32 or more games.
Yeah, so there was a spine of players.
There was yeah. And that was the thing. It's like you can rotate, and Spurs do it. Spurs do it really well, where they rotate the fullbacks. But you know that Harry Kane, Ali, the 2 centre halves,
Eriksen,
yeah. There are certain players who Spurs play 90%, 95% of the time, and maybe Coventry will do that. That's fine. You can have, as long as the players you've got are, and as you say, are good enough. But again, I suppose they're back. The point of making Spurs argument is it backs up your point. Is basically, the players that Spurs take out, they replace like with like. I suppose the thing is, you could say that Grimmer and Sterling are similar sort of players in the fact that they're probably more offensive or meant to be than they are defensive. The same with Brown and Mason at left back. They're quite similar types of players. But you're attacking...
It's the attacking players that get...
It's the attacking forward. And I think someone made a question on Twitter. It's like basically... The defence looks relatively solid, which is what we had last season. The midfield too are pretty solid, which is what we had last season. Is it just a case of waiting for that front 4 to click? Now, the issue can be is, if it doesn't click, how long does he take before he changes it? Or the worry is, prime example from last season is, it took Mark McNulty till Christmas to get going. Now, the problem is that this season is, if Bakayoko doesn't score in 4 games, there will be a massive clamour for Biami to come in. And that's the thing. It's like I think we're almost in a position where we have too many first choice. We have too many he has too many decisions to make. And it'd be interesting to see if we do. Obviously, there's been talk about loaning people like Johnson Clark-Harris out. And you just wonder if maybe we do need to just trim a couple of these players just to sort of make things a bit easier.
Here's a question for you, Paul. You would expect that when Jody Jones is fit again, that he comes straight back in. Who do you think he'd come in for at the moment?
I can see him coming in for... I think he comes in for Bayliss. I think he doesn't play Bayliss. I think he goes for Geordie, Tony, Jones and Bakayoko, which is, if you looked at it on paper, that's a pretty offensive, quick, direct... I think you'd be happy with those 4. I think that my question would be, who out of those 4 is going to do the sort of the more of the donkey work, be the sort of water carrier type thing out of those 4, like sort of the Giroud for France, for want of a better term, the guy who's just going to basically just do his job and facilitate everyone else. But after what we were saying about Tony last Saturday, I've seen quite a few people sort of saying that they're not sure how Tony's going to work away from home. Does the 4-2-3-1 suit us? Are we better not playing 4-4-2? I think, as you said earlier, I think the most pressing thing is we're only 2 games in. And I don't think, because we made those signings quite late in the summer, I don't think they've settled down yet. Maybe in 3 games' time, we rattle 3 against Plymouth at the weekend, we beat Blackpool away. The next couple of games aren't not difficult games. They're games that could kickstart our season.
Do you know what I think we need to do?
Shut up and see what happens?
No. I think we need to announce another striker, preferably Connor Chaplin, who I know is going to be a goal-scoring machine, having never seen him play in my life.
But the thing is, it's like, where does he fit into this? That's what I don't understand about the sort of the desire for him all season, or all summer, because you get the thing, where does he fit in?
Well, I don't know, because I haven't seen him, but I'd suggest you ask all the people that have seen him play 100 games for Portsmouth.
But I really don't think that we need to sign another striker.
No, we don't need to sign another striker.
Can I just pick up on a couple of things here? The first is that, related to what you've been saying, Robbins complained after the game about a lack of fluency in our forward play. A lack of connection between the players. I was just thinking, why are you surprised? You've brought in a player who's been at the club for a couple of days, missed out on all the doesn't that tell you how much store Robins appears to set by planning or a pre-season? Is that he just brings in someone who's been there for 2 days and appears to expect them to fit into the system as if they'd been kind of schooled at the club since they were a child. I just thought that was bizarre. I just don't know what he expects with that. Yeah. And the other thing that I thought was really strange was that he kept saying, "Oh, as you can see, we're still not there fitness-wise," and he was naming 4 or 5 different players who looked like they were short of fitness going into the last 20 to 15 minutes of the game. Now, I can accept that there are 1 or 2 players who've come out of exceptional circumstances, like Ondra, who has not had many competitive games of football in the last year, who might still be finding it difficult. Robins was not saying, "Oh, Wimbledon looked like they were struggling physically." Why are we the only ones, according to him, that are why are we struggling physically?
2 points to that. One, it's just lovely that we're not having we're the fittest we've ever been, because that's what they normally fit out. 2, not that I'm not saying this is I stand by this or I'm against this. It's just a thing that a lot of people have said is obviously because we got to the playoff final, we're a week behind everyone else. But I'm not sure if I buy that or don't. I just think it's Robins does do this. He did this quite a bit last season. He's not afraid to throw players under the bus.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, he got us promoted. He must have his methods. But there are times where you're just like, okay, but maybe say that to them in private. But maybe it's also a listen to the fans. It's like, look, we are going to be shit for 6 weeks. Don't get on my back because it will click. I think, as I said, I think this season's just there are a lot of sort of undercurrents at the moment and things, just generally with players, people. We all have our favourite players. I like Bayami. I felt one of the things I thought was quite interesting was you looked at the team sheet and you were like, oh, okay, he has dropped Bayami. I didn't think he did anything wrong against Scunthorpe, but obviously you don't spend that money on Bakayoko and have him on the bench. The question is, it's like, if Bakayoko hasn't scored in 2 or 3 or 4 games, do we bring Bayami back? If Sterling is at fault for a goal on Saturday, does Grimmer get a chance? But then it's difficult because you've signed these players, you've obviously built them up, you've signed them, like Sterling, you're going to be my first choice right back, don't go to the Championship, League One, I can develop you, I can do this, oh, you drop before the end of August, and you're then going to spend the rest of the site till the January transfer window when you might be able to get repulled by Chelsea and I'm not going to play you. And I think there's always that argument whenever you sign any loan player, and someone's made it eloquently on Twitter, you make those decisions, don't you? You've got your own player who you've signed, he's your player, you're paying him your wages, you want the best for him, but you've signed a loan player from somewhere else, and you've obviously made promises to that club that you're going to develop them, you're going to play them because that's what you've done. And there are certain times, like with Adam Armstrong, it's like no one in the club was better than Adam Armstrong, so it didn't matter, Adam Armstrong starts. The thing with Sterling, it was like, oof, that's quite a difficult one. You're buying in a right back, and you've sort of almost got to play him because you've signed him from Chelsea. But I thought we needed a someone to compete with Jack Grimmer. I don't have an issue with having that sort of him having that pressure on him. But again, it's like a case of like, well, if you've got someone like Bayami you can drop, and maybe you can drop Bakayoko, how easy is it going to be to drop Sterling? How much, how are you going to deal with that? And that's going to be Robins' biggest thing this season. How's he going to manage everyone?
Just to be clear, I like Robins, and I don't think that when he was talking about fitness, he was talking about it in an accusatory way or blaming players for not being fit or trying to pin, a lack of wins. And let's remember, it's only 2 games in, and I think we'll do quite well this season. But I don't think he was trying to blame players. I just thought it was odd that he seemed to be citing a lack of fitness for us. But didn't seem to suggest that was this game that was applicable to the opposition as well. And I just thought in that case, well, why aren't we fit? And you might be right, Paul, that it's something to do with being in the playoff final. I don't find that a very convincing explanation. I did feel frustrated listening to the interview that he wasn't asked why aren't they fit for the beginning of the season, because I would like to know what his feeling is about that.
But there's a level to which it's like being a postman and being like, there's a situation here where a load of people haven't got letters. You're like, well, it's because you haven't delivered them. There's no, do you know what I mean? That was just your job to do, wasn't it? He's like, listen, I don't make the rules. Just these letters haven't been delivered. That's the situation, okay?
But don't worry. In 5 or 6 weeks, these letters are going to get delivered really well.
It'll be fine. Just don't worry about it. Let's drag this on, I think, because time passes as usual.
Don't you mean let's not drag this on?
Well, yeah. That ship very much has sailed. We got Plymouth on Saturday. We've actually got Oxford tomorrow, but as is traditional for the Neil Lamptey show, we don't acknowledge the early stages of cup competition, such as our success in them. So instead, I've talked to Dom earlier about Plymouth on Saturday, and here is that. Hi Dom, welcome back.
Hiya.
Plymouth on Saturday. How have they done so far?
They've pretty much had the same start to the season that we have. They took the lead in their opening game against Walsall and then conceded 2 in the second half. And then on Saturday, they drew 1-1 at home with Southend in a fiery contest featuring someone who we might be getting to know a bit better. If this game is even slightly tempestuous, Plymouth's manager Derek Adams, who is, if you haven't come across him, he is
nutty.
He's not like nutty. He's just like, he's almost kind of like calculated in a way he can just get on people's nerves, grind their gears. He's got an amazing track record. There was a thread by a Plymouth fan over the summer just summarising the moments Derek Adams has had over the past 2 or 3 years. Stuff like blaming defeats on the colour of the team's kit, and then the next game making the team play on their away kit, and then they lost anyway. One time he got Liam Kelly banned. This is when Liam Kelly was playing for Leyton Orient, for aggressively trying to take the ball off a ball boy, even though it wouldn't have affected Plymouth at all in their following games. Kelly got a 6-game ban because Adams made a complaint to the FA.
Seriously?
Yeah, and at the weekend, he managed to wind up nicest man in football, Chris Powell, to the extent that apparently Chris Powell grabbed his throat. They both got sent off. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realise that. That completely passed me by.
Yeah, so he's quite the character.
Yeah, sounds it. What about on the pitch? Does that that eccentricity translate onto the pitch?
Well, he's actually a really good lower league manager. He had a spell at Ross County where he took them into the Scottish Premier League and established them there, and then he sort of went to Plymouth. It was sort of a bit of an under the radar appointment, but he sort of dragged the club up from a pretty sorry position when he arrived, when they're in League Two, sort of mid-table, occasionally getting in a relegation scrap. He's got a really good eye for players in the transfer market. I think it's the most notable signing he made at Plymouth is Graham Carey, who was a player sort of middling in Scotland, who had been at Celtic but hadn't really kicked on in his career. He was sort of a winger, came to Plymouth, played him in central midfield, and he's been absolutely sensational past 2 or 3 years, just winning games on his own for Plymouth. Really good on the ball, can pick a pass, but he's also got an eye for goal, and he's probably a championship player who, for some reason, Plymouth have been able to keep hold on. Actually, last summer they signed Ruben Lemiris, basically on the understanding that Carey was going to go to the championship. Carey ended up staying, and for the first 2 or 3 months of last season, Lemiris just wasn't getting a sniff at the first team. He was allowed to go on trial at Oldham with a view to a transfer there. But when Lemiris came into the side eventually, he formed quite a nice creative partnership with Carey, which nearly dragged Plymouth into the playoff positions last season. This summer it has been a bit of a rebuild. A lot of new players in the side. at the moment, it's a bit of a conundrum how they get the best out of Carey and Lemiris in the same side, while they play a target man striker in Ryan Taylor, who is not exactly the most prolific, a bit like Maxime Villarmu. And also, quite like us, they've got a load of fullbacks who are really good going forward, but not the best defensively. So it's two pretty similar sides heading into this game. So it could be, it could either be very boring or potentially interesting.
Any other players to look out for?
There's a couple of players in midfield, sort of decent ball players. They've got David Fox, who's a very experienced sort of deep line playmaker. I was reading a Plymouth blog earlier today who was describing as a regista, which always seems slightly out of place in the lower leagues, but he's just very important, sort of getting them playing out from the band. Had Jamie Niis, who sort of replaced John Fleck at Rangers as like the promising young player who never quite got a shot in the side and has had to go to England to try and build his career up. He's sort of a nice ball-playing midfielder as well, a bit like Fleck.
Fox, Sarcevic, fans of League One football will recognise the names of, no doubt. How do you think it's going to pan out then?
I think, as I mentioned, I think this could be quite a dull game unless there's sort of any kind of needle involved, any sort of fiery incidents. I can see this being kind of a drab game between two sides still needing to gel. So I'm going to predict a 0-0.
Great. That's exactly what we need after the excitement of last Saturday. Final thing I'll say on Plymouth, obviously my role here to add extra insight. Great kit this season.
Oh yeah, it's a work of beauty. I quite like the Puma kits this season. They just seem to be quite nice, crisp and clean, like the AFC Wimbledon's.
Yeah. I thought that was very pleasing on the eye, the two blues together. Clive seemed furious about the fact, Clive Eakin, of course, me and him are on first name terms, obviously, furious about the fact that the referee had allowed two teams that played in very different shades of blue to come up against each other. I thought it was all very pleasant. Some decent kits this season.
Yeah, but also, the bottom of the list for kits, MK Dons, it's an absolute horror show, and Wiggins is awful. I think they're both made by the same kit designer, and just got random. MK Dons just got random gold on it, and Wiggins got random silver, and it looks awful.
I think Wiggins this season is quite good because isn't it a throwback to a '90s one?
Yeah, I don't like it.
Oh, there you go. That's kits put to bed then. Right, okay. Well, we'll look forward to a drab 0-0 draw then.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
All right, speak to you next week.
Bye-bye. Okay, thanks, Dom. Let's try and wrap things up quickly with some questions then. Let's take to Twitter and see what we've got. We have got a question. I'm going to fire these between you. From Sky Blue Hub, who is at SkyCCFC on Twitter. Jordan Shipley, better with or without him in the side? Ed, why don't you pick that one up?
Without.
Pourquoi? Why?
I know this is a bit controversial. I don't think he's very good.
Oh, you fucking heathen.
I know, and I know that's really not in line with the ideology of the Neil Lamptey show.
No, it's not. But you like joy, don't you, and stuff on the football field?
Very much so. Very much so. He's a little bit too utilitarian for me. He's a bit too much of a systems guy.
Oh, God. How can you be too much of a systems guy in a team game?
I know. I'm sorry, but he's just not for me. And I think that I just have this feeling that time will prove me right on this one. No. I think about this and I can see the word Nuneaton in big letters in my head.
No way. You take that back. That's not happening at all.
I will not take that back.
From Ian Heron, should MR use, which I assume is Mark Robbins, I preferred MGR for Mark Gordon Robbins, use tomorrow's game to experiment with different combinations up top or to consolidate any of Saturday's choices?
Yeah, difficult. They clearly need to play games together, but as we were saying earlier, you get the feeling that some players probably need a bit of a run out, and Shipley, going back to the previous question, is probably one of those players who deserves 90 minutes. As I'm not going, unlike last year where I got pissed off because it was just a farce of a team, don't really care, to be honest. I can see, from what Ed was saying, I can see Grimmer starting. He might start with Junior Brown. He might give Burge a run out. I can see him basically making 11 changes, and if we go through, we go through. If we get knocked out, I don't think anyone's going to give two shits, to be honest.
Very good. Ed, back to you. 2 questions from Steve Perdomo on Twitter. Dujon Sterling, as he's been dubbed by Neil. Why so much hate? Feels like we've done that a little bit, don't we? And what will our best midfield look like, or will it be decided on a game-by-game basis? We talked about the sort of ins and outs of some of the players. What would your, kind of your 2 and 3 out of the 4-2-3-1 look like at the moment?
At the moment, or when we've got everyone back?
Let's do everyone back.
Okay, ideally for me, I think my 2 would be Agogo and Bayliss, and my 3 would be Andre, Bakayoko and Jones.
Do you have to be quite so relentlessly precise in your pronunciation of Andre? We have, as a church here, have decided that Andrew is perfectly fine.
I refuse to compromise on this.
Okay. Paul, you're going to love this question from Pete Liggins. Who will Robbins bring in to wear the number 10 shirt?
Gallas.
Okay.
We answered that last week.
Then, Paul, I'm going to leave this one with you as well. What is our best forward line when everyone's fit, which is kind of the reverse of what Ed had?
I don't know, because I haven't seen Bakayoko. I've only seen a little bit of Geordie. I haven't seen Andrew away on a wet, windy night in Fleetwood. I don't know. I think that is going to be a massive conundrum as the season goes forward, how we manage to get enough goals and how it's all going to fit together. I honestly, because I just haven't seen them. All I know is it probably doesn't include Ponticelli and Johnson Clark Harris. And then, other than that, I think the young lad who scored tonight could easily force his way into the team by Christmas.
Yeah, I just think I think I'm enticed by the concept of him more than because I haven't seen him properly yet. But I just thought for some reason I just thought he'd be playing. But then I suppose I thought that before we signed Hwula. Anyway, final question, and an interesting one, and one that I'll throw at Ed, from Dave Clare on Twitter. Is the team we put out on Saturday as good as the team who beat Exeter at Wembley?
I don't know how you would make that judgment. Yeah, I think it probably is. I think that we've made some good signings. I think that Mason is an upgrade on what we had before. I think that Agogo is a good player. We know that he's been a significant player in a successful League One team. I think that having Andre back introduces something we didn't have last season. I think we are. I think we might not be playing like we are, but I think that I think it's very difficult to judge. But I would say that we have the potential, at the very least, in that to be better than the team that finished the end of last season.
But it's all a bit of a misnomer, isn't it? Because it's sort of I don't mean to disrespect the question. I think the question is quite an interesting one, but I think it also goes forward into we're playing that next level up. Yeah. And maybe the benchmark for this season will be, where are we in relation to Luton and Accrington, who've also got promoted? Maybe there should be, if we finish above those two, we should consider this a good season. If we finish beneath them, maybe it's a poor season. Maybe that's where, for the time being, we should be sort of benchmarking how we're actually developing as a side.
Very good. Any other business that we want to get to before we wrap things up?
We following on from last week, Nike come out and sort of apologise for the fact they're a honking pile of shit, and we might have new kits available or new home shirts available in September.
are people not just going and buying the retro kit from FMC online instead?
I hope they are, and I hope he continues to profit from his endeavours. But there are, these kits this season will be someone else's retro kit in 20 years' time, and I demand to be able to sell mine on eBay for £4 million.
I hope that they are buying his retro kits. I bought one of his retro kits, and people keep coming up to me and saying how sexy I look in it. And he's got my address if he wants to send me anything for saying that. So I think they're really nice.
And when you see Ed sort of normally, you realise just how much those shirts are adding.
How much work the shirt is doing. Yeah.
Right. Any other business? Yeah. Let's get out of here. Thank you very much, Ed.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Paul.
Cheers, buddy.
And we'll speak to you next week. Bye.